The next session of the Ukraine Recovery Conference takes place on Tuesday in the German capital Berlin. It's the third recovery conference, but the first time it's been held in a European Union member state. Now, there have already been some tensions ahead of the meeting with the resignation of the director of the state agency for restoring Ukraine. Well, these pictures show the scale of the problem in Ukraine. Kharkiv is the country's second city, situated perilously close to the Russian border. It's currently being pummeled daily by Russian missile strikes, with Ukraine unable to field sufficient air defenses to ward off the lethal mix of drones, cruise and ballistic missiles aimed in its direction. Timothy Ash is an associate fellow in the Russia and Eurasia program at Chatham House, and I asked him what he thinks President Zelensky aims to get out of this conference.
Well, as you said, this is the third set of these conferences. They were driven by the fact that, if you remember the second Gulf War in Iraq, the West forgot about recovery and reconstruction, focused on winning the war. This time around, with the Ukraine war, there's been a lot of focus on what happens, when the war's won or ends, and about Ukraine's recovery and reconstruction. And really, it's about the money in the end. Winning the war is very expensive. We're spending about $100 billion a year to keep Ukraine in the war. Recovery and reconstruction, the costs to Ukraine have been something like around $500 billion in damage. The total reconstruction could be around $1 trillion. Who's going to pay for that? These conferences have some focus on that, but also the institutional structure around rebuilding, reconstruction, how those monies are going to be managed and coordinated. So that's a key focus.
Now, this is also coming right before a G7 summit in Italy, where leaders are expected to roll out new loans to Ukraine from frozen Russian assets. What to do with those assets has been contentious. Is the tide, in your opinion, turning now, do you think, in favor of using them?
Well, as you said, there's momentum behind this idea of using immobilized Russian assets because of the numbers are so huge. As I mentioned, $100 billion a year to simply keep Ukraine in the war. To win the war, it's probably $150 billion a year. And then recovery and reconstruction, probably $1 trillion. Where's the money going to come from? Western taxpayers probably don't want to pay. We've had European elections this weekend. Populism was pretty important there. And there's $330 billion of Russian central bank assets in Western jurisdictions, in Western bank accounts. That's Russian taxpayer money. There's a big campaign to make sure that money is used first to pay for winning the war, to give Ukraine so it can buy the weapons to defend itself, but also then fund the recovery and reconstruction. That's going to be a key focus of this G7 summit. The US, Canada, the UK is pushing for Russian taxpayer money to be used. There's lobbying by Europeans, and particularly the ECB, to make sure that doesn't happen. They're less enthusiastic about it. So key battleground. But in the end, if the money doesn't come, Ukraine could lose the war. That's the reality.